As Chicago marches into Washington, the number one overall pick will take on a number two overall pick. The question is, which one? How's the game going to go down? What's happened since we last did a podcast? And where on earth did I go? All that and more on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Us, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, editor-in-chief of the Bears blog, right here alongside my co-host Nick Whalen of Football Guys. And I want to start with an apology because Nick actually announced his vacation time, and I did not think to talk about it until Sunday when Nick, this is not great, texts me like, "Are we recording today?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have a family trip." And so my bad.
I spent more time with the wife, which is always good.
Which is always good.
So Robert, you said this in the intro. I don't even know where you went. So where did you go?
I went to Colorado. It was great. We had a trip scheduled with a couple friends and family, and we took the 2-year-old, which there's this old adage, Nick, maybe you'll find out about it one day, of you take vacations before you have kids, and then once you have kids, you take trips. And this was my first real experience with that, and it's definitely true. It was awesome. It was relaxing, but chasing a 2-year-old around who's just going heavy metal all the time.
Where in Colorado?
We were in Telluride. So we were 1.5 miles up, and my body was not made for altitude, by the way. Which, speaking of, okay, this was not an intentional segue, but I do think it's worth talking about. It is still wild looking back at the fact that the betting line was -1 for the Jaguars, given that we live on an Earth that travel and location and biome and rest, dude, these things matter. The fact that the Jaguar, I don't know what you thought. I thought the Bears jumped on the Jaguars starting around the second quarter, sure. But after that, I thought the Jaguars looked jet-lagged and the Bears just beat the tar out of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you look back at that game, I know it was a hot little while ago, but hey, what better time to refresh the last game than going into the next one? How did you feel about the game and when the bye happened?
Yeah, and I was nervous talking with Bucket Stats, if people know him, shout out, the really smart dude. I was nervous before the game because that's when the Bears lost a few defensive backs. We knew Stevenson wasn't going to play. And then the Jaguars got Gabe Davis and Evan Ingram. And I was like, oh no, because I was a big Evan Ingram fan coming out of Ole Miss. And some drives, it was like, they can just throw to these guys all game, but eventually the defense corralled them. And dude, Caleb Williams, here's some stats. And I told Robert this before the pod, y'all. I got stats on stats on stats. So
I've been told he has, quote, 1 million, end quote, stats. So
literally, no. So this was a good one I stole, and Caleb had 6 incompletions against the Jaguars. 3 were throwaways. 1 was the batted down one that went right into our right guard. One was batted down. 1 was the hitting the right guard, and then 1 was the interception. Other than that, he was 23 of 24 when he was like literally aiming the pass and trying to complete it. 23 of 24.
It's pretty solid.
He was, I mean, and we're going to talk about this, but like having a quarterback with this ability, Robert, it's kind of like Talladega Nights. Like, I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
Right. I mean, it's funny talk about Caleb, I think, Nick, because the funniest part to me is that you can say 2 things at the same time, which one almost sounds negative, but I promise I mean this in a positive way. Caleb Williams is setting a floor that is completely workable when it comes to providing an offense. Like, what we're seeing is really solid intermediate passing, the ability to get the ball out to the edge of the field, the ability to audible into a look that we like, general manipulation of the defense, generally decent operation of reading the defense and finding your read. Are we skipping over a couple reads sometimes? Yes. Every once in a while, a receiver's literally running the same route, like not in a good way. Yeah, it's happening out there. Do we get everything right? No. But It's so fun, Nick, because I see Caleb as playing good football right now. Maybe not great, but good football. And also, he's only at like 70% of his potential.
Right.
So there's serious room to grow where you can get a lot better reasonably. But what you are getting right now, you can win football games with this. Will you beat
Mhm.
the Vikings? I don't know yet. We probably want to see if we can push for 80% of our
Yeah.
potential before we get there. But right now is probably good enough to beat the Patriots. I think it's good enough to beat the Cardinals. We'll see. If it's good
Yeah.
enough to beat the Commanders, that depends. All that to say, Nick, it's like to just reframe it one more time. What we have is solid. We can get
Mhm.
even better. And we don't need to act like Caleb's arrived because this isn't his final form yet, if you
Well
follow. We're
well,
just taking great steps.
so here's okay, I have to correct something that you said or challenge you on one thing, okay?
Sure.
So yeah, I agree that this isn't like the best he'll be. The cool part is we don't know how good he'll be, but you had
Hmm.
said solid in the middle of the field. And going again to my million stats, y'all. I stole this one from Nicholas Moriano. You guys probably know him at CHGO. Go check them out as well. He pulled this one and in breaking routes. Okay. So, I mean, literally basics, digs, slants, ins, drags,
Probably the most important routes in football, if we're
posts.
being honest.
Yeah.
These
I
are the
mean,
chain movers.
the area Mitch and Justin struggled
It's the
in.
consistent chain mover. It's the Shanahan offense. It is
Mhm.
what any offense. It's Tom Brady, dude. Like,
Yep.
not to
Yep.
be this guy,
Brock
but like
Purdy. Yep.
you the outside or the outbreaking routes are where you make a lot of sick highlights and where people like you and me, I mean
Mhm.
this is a good thing. We look at Ohio State tape and we go, holy smokes, Justin threw that from the left hash to the right sideline and it looked
Yep.
like that. Like the outbreakers are where you get people's attention, but the inbreakers in the NFL, I mean, I'm not saying this just because of Caleb, Nick. This is where you win. You win
Well,
football games
okay.
when
Well,
you can hit
look,
these.
I'll get the stat in a little bit because we're getting on this. Why are in breaking routes difficult, Robert?
Clog. That's
Mhm.
where you generally have to throw between TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. And the only
Mhm.
reason you get a window to throw between them is because you pushed your eyes to the right hand side and made TJ Edwards take 2 steps to his right. And if he doesn't step there, you're throwing at his face. So you
Yes.
have to move him and you have to throw on time. It is very, very difficult
Not just on time. What else?
with accuracy and velocity.
And anticipation. Like
Hmm.
all of those things go together. And like you're saying, the cool part is this kid 70% is, and then here's the stat. Okay. So on those in breaking routes, again, as a rookie, y'all, he is plus 29.4 EPA on those attempts. Um, 506 of his yards, 3 touchdowns, and it's third most in the NFL. He's averaged 10.8 yards per attempt, which is the most among a rookie quarterback since 2018 in that area.
Hmm.
Like, and again, it's going to get better. Like, that's why it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the level is with this kid. I know everyone's pumped about this kid from Washington, which we'll talk about in a bit, but I'll take it because this is something we've never had, man.
It's really weird to talk about this because this is going to sound like I'm cheating, but Nick, I think you know it's the case. You look at Will Levis, you look at Anthony Richardson, you look at Justin Fields, name a lot of quarterbacks that are up and down, and generally what do you see, Nick? I'm completely serious. Where do these quarterbacks tend to make their hay?
On well, scrambling. I mean, it's
Scrambling.
very
So broken
inconsistent.
plays,
Yep.
like what we're seeing with Bo Nix,
Yep.
really poor EPA per play in the pocket. But once he gets out of the pocket, he's actually plus efficiency. So
Yes.
that's what's keeping the Broncos offense alive. But it's also what type of throw. Let me
Yeah,
try to lead you to water.
I would say outside the numbers and deep down the field.
Deep balls is what I'm
Mhm.
going for. Anthony Richardson had a game, we all saw it, week 1, where he completed 9 total passes and he threw for 215 yards. When you hit a 65-yard touchdown, it forgives a lot of sins. With the problem being, Nick, that it's not that difficult. Like I know a deep ball is hard. Obviously, Caleb has missed plenty of them. But the point I'm trying to make, Nick, is how unusual it is for a quarterback to be almost all of his current expected points added total comes from the hard stuff.
Yes.
Like the deep ball stuff if it regresses to the mean at all, his EPA should explode.
Yep.
I'm the sane one. Like of the two of us, I'm generally the pessimist. And if his 13% deep ball percentage goes to 28, that means there's going to be a couple games where he hits 3 out of 4 deep shots and picks up like 145 yards just off of throwing the ball long. And that's going to just pop the top off of the numbers that he has. Not like total yardage, but for yard or for expected points added, for touchdown numbers. Like Nick,
Mhm.
it's hard. You just don't see a quarterback that is this accurate in the intermediate and short area so far, and he's
Mhm.
this poor deep. Like he's so solid. And I should clarify, when I say solid, there's this college joke that a friend of mine named Carter Ratley and I have, where it's a Marshawn Lynch quote where he says, what do you think you, or an interviewer asked him like, hey Marshawn, if you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be? And he goes, solid. And the guy goes, that's it? And he says, it don't get no better than solid.
Ah,
So
okay.
that's where I'm coming.
We need to know this stuff ahead of time, Robert. We're good.
Sol-
So let
solid
me.
means no flaws. Like it
Oh,
is
okay.
rock solid.
All right, rock solid, like a solid bar
It-
of gold is what I'm
yeah,
going with.
it's not
So
explosive. I get it's a different adjective, right? It's like it's not
yeah,
explosive. It's not red hot. It's
so
just solid. And his
I'd
work
put
right,
solid as like above average, like
right.
in my mind.
But what I'm trying to say is that right now on third down, if you allow any space over the middle of the field, Caleb is finding it. Like
Yes.
he's becoming, dare I say, dependable on
Mhm.
key third and intermediates. And
Yep.
that's massive. Like you can do so many things if
Mhm.
your quarterback can pick that up for you, man.
So let's get into more of the Caleb numbers and again the million stats. So
And remind me to come back to the defense later, but we'll get there.
yeah. So weeks 1 through 3, EPA per dropback, he was 28th in the NFL. Weeks 4 through 7, he's third in the NFL. Passer rating,
Can you
again,
walk us
28th.
through what EPA per dropback means?
Yeah, so it's expected points added. So it's everything is not the same. Like it's a blown coverage, a guy's wide open. You didn't add a whole lot to that play versus what the average mean would be. Similar to like let's say a running back. I know the same example. Remember when David Montgomery had that like 80-yard touchdown against Houston, but like nobody was in the hole and he just kind of just ran free down the
Yes.
sideline? He didn't add a bunch expected to that because most running backs should have done that. But when David Montgomery would break 3 tackles and do David Montgomery
Right.
things, that's added. So that kind of gives you the difference. So he's adding again at a rate the last 4 games of the third best in the NFL. Um, Completion percentage, first 3 games, 30th in the NFL, last 4 games, second in the NFL. And this might be the most important one of all of those. EPA versus blitz, right? Because pressure and O line, this has been a concern for us. Negative 6.1 EPA versus the blitz the first 3 games, 29th in the NFL.
Pretty heinous.
Yeah. I still remember the Titans D line. Um, he's 7th in the NFL now against the blitz EPA. So massive improvements. I have more Caleb stats, but if you want to dive into those, go ahead.
Well, from the film perspective, one thing that has gotten a lot better, the Bears are picking up a lot more blitzes. They don't get fooled on stunts near as badly. And I want to give a serious hat tip. I know he took a hold a couple games ago on a play just like this. DeAndre Swift is the best running back blocker that I've seen in a Bears uniform in a hot minute. Like, I made the joke on stream that I think DeAndre Swift, in some points, less plays running back and more plays athlete, but he plays halfback. Like
Yeah.
the way people don't like Swift because he doesn't break a bunch of tackles like what they think a running back should. But man, he can step up and hit a linebacker in the hole, and he'll attack the correct shoulder to push that linebacker out of the passing lane. It was part of it's the play that created, go back and look at it, the 18 to 30 yard completion to Roma Dunze that was that big post over the middle. That's a
Mhm.
big blitz pickup, and that's going to help you because on EPA per blitz, man, if you can extend that time to throw at all,
Yep.
you can generally create a big seam downfield. But
Mhm.
The
I mean,
rest of it,
just wasn't it week 1 when Kari Blasingame missed the blitz pickup, but now
mhm,
you got someone that can help.
exactly. Not to mention, I want to remind Bears fans that there is a downside to anticipation. The best throwers that we've seen in the league all throw with anticipation. But a quarterback that throws with anticipation while on the wrong page with his receiver is going to miss. And you saw a ton of that in weeks 1 and 2, where Caleb clearly was not on the same page with his receivers. Now, whose fault is that? We'll never know, right, Nick? But it feels plain to me, Nick, that we're starting to see these receivers and their quarterback get on the same page. And within that, the offensive line is playing with confidence. I don't want to make it a thing. You and I don't need to make it a thing. But clearly, the injection of Matt Pryor has breathed a little bit of life into this offensive line unit because they just seem like they're vibrant in a way that they weren't a couple weeks ago. It could just be accidental timing. Like, I don't necessarily think Matt Pryor is the patron saint of guard play by any stretch of the
Nope.
imagination. But there's something to be said, and I know you know this, you've coached offense, for offensive line is like one five-headed dragon rather than five individuals. So
Mhm,
whatever's going on, they they seem like they are playing much more like
mhm.
a unit, and I see that as a good thing because if I can be
Well,
blunt, it's the first time I think I've seen the offensive line play as a true unit under Chris Morgan's tenure.
yeah, it's more there's more to that because I had thought they were gonna make a change and bring Bates in over the bye week, but Flu said, I think today or yesterday, that they're gonna keep the 5 the same. So, the more that they can gel, the more that they can communicate and pick up blitzes and calls and things like that. Um, Back to my Caleb Williams stats because
Please.
they're awesome.
They are.
Um, let's go passer rating by week. 55.7, 51, 80.8, 106.6, 126.2, 124.4. If we put this over all of the weeks, we're not just cherry picking the good ones, all of them, his current 17 game pace, y'all, 3,732 yards, 26 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, but also 479 rushing yards. If we wanted to have fun, Robert, and pick, the third EPA per drop back, last 4 games where he's at, that 4 game pace over 17 games, 4,463 yards, 38 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 468 rushing yards.
Oh, yeah. And just to add to this, I know this is cheating. Guess what? You're on a podcast with two Bears guys on it. I'm going to cheat with numbers. If you take the first 2 weeks and instead of considering them defensive problems, you consider them rookie lumps, and you take the last 4 weeks, Nick, average it out over the rest of the season, given the current statistics, you end up with 4,200 passing yards. So, in theory, if Caleb plays above passing yardage expectation, all right, everybody, all I want is to win the game. We're football heads here. We get
Yep.
it. But for fun sake, if Caleb has a 400-yard passing game against the Patriots and throws for 330 against the Commanders, and maybe he throws for 280 against the Cardinals, that gives him a lot of room to have a couple 200, 210-yard games and still, I'm completely serious, challenge Eric Kramer's record
Yeah.
like by the end of the season, which
Well,
is a wild thing. That is
it
a
is.
wild thing.
Well, Robert, I remember the Eric Kramer season, like I Curtis Conway, Jeff Graham, Keith Jennings. I know there's people right now, they're like, "Oh yeah, they remember those guys." Um, but the one thing I see on Twitter, we're in these battles against Commanders fans with Jaden Daniels, and we have to bank all these wins to make the playoffs, all this kind of stuff. I want to take a step back for a second, Robert. I want us to remember the purpose of this season. It's not to make the playoffs. It's not to win so many games. It's not even to beat Green Bay. The purpose of the season is to develop Caleb Williams and to know if he is the guy or not. If he is, the season is a success. They could win, lose, or they could lose the rest of the games. But if you know Caleb is the man, it's a good season. And what we did throughout the season was a success because there could be injuries, there could be bad luck, there could be whatever. But right now, It already looks like a successful season in my eyes.
I am obligated to agree with you because there is nothing more important than whether you develop your franchise quarterback. But I do, Nick, want to push back. Each individual player, person, front office member, coach has different goals, and they should, right? For Caleb, show us what you got. For Matt Eberflus, it's maximize the team. You don't know when the last season of Jalen Johnson's career is. You have no idea. You
No,
don't know how long you get this Andrew Billings. You have no. Do you think Tommy Harris's career was supposed to play out like that? Of
no,
course it wasn't. So if you've got lightning in a bottle, Nick, you do. I don't know about need, but it is somebody's job to attempt to capture it. And if you're feeling like I'm feeling, 2-1 over the next 3 games feels extremely achievable. 3-0 feels legitimately on the table. And
yep,
if you go 3-0 over the next couple games, you got to win 4 to break both of you and like me our preseason predictions, which looked laughable a couple weeks ago with an
mhm,
11-win season that I don't know how you miss the playoffs if you win 11 games. And then Nick, I don't know if you remember this, but this was a popular statistic floating around during Josh Allen's second season. Quarterback, generally speaking, I can't remember the specific numbers. Forgive me, Bears fans. Generally speaking, a franchise quarterback will make the playoffs within his first 2 seasons. That sounds cutthroat. That sounds harsh. But as a starter, Nick, generally the guys have a track record of finding a way into the playoffs. Whether they win, lose, or tie in the playoffs doesn't matter so much
mhm.
as making the dance at some point early. And if the Bears have a shot to do it, I don't see why you and I need to hedge. It's okay for us to say that this team might have what it takes to surprise people because whenever you're ready, I want to go through the defensive game plan against London because the people need to hear how Flus adjusted to losing a bunch of secondary members because he's never done it before and it was rad.
Well, so, man, your whole because the segue is there to talk about trade targets if that's where you wanna go, because if you wanna push because you think we're there, but I'm gonna let you talk about the defense. Can I talk about, I
You can
think,
talk
the
about whatever
one.
you want to.
All right. So here's a change that I'm not sure people noticed. And I can't remember where I read this from. Someone did a lot of good work on this. So Kyler Gordon is incredible, y'all. I know he's injured right now with a hamstring, and we'll see when he comes back. He didn't practice today, neither did Brisker, but we'll see how that plays out throughout the week. Um, but blitzing Kyler Gordon has kind of been the only thing that they've consistently done to generate pressure. There's quickly to kind of develop this. I would call blitzing bringing 6 players. Pressure is generally, I would say, 5 players, and then simulated pressure is 4. Okay, so simulated pressure is when you drop off a D lineman and you bring somebody else. But they would either do pressure or simulated pressure with Kyler Gordon coming. And the thing that Flus did is he would always do it on kind of obvious passing downs. He would do it with Kyler Gordon, and then he started run blitzing him on other downs, and it really threw the Jaguars off. That's why you saw Kyler Gordon in the backfield tackling Tank Bigsby, tackling Travis Etienne, getting a sack. Well, no, I think he missed a couple of the sacks, but he was there disrupting. And so Falus, through self scouting, knew what offenses were like ready. Like, hey, okay, we're anticipating this guy coming off at the edge on these downs. We weren't ready for him on these downs. So that's good scouting and game planning to throw off your own tendencies to get advantages against the offense.
You're taking the words out of my mouth, which is good because it means we both saw the same thing, and that
Yep.
generally means it's what happened.
Mhm.
I loved the fact that in the first drive, so here's something that everybody's just gotta you just gotta get ready for this because it's gonna keep happening. The Bears seem to trot out a deliberately vanilla game plan against the other team for the first drive of the game. They basically want to see what the other team is doing while presenting them. I don't want to call it a static look. That's not fair, Nick, but their most base forms of their standard coverages. They trot them out. They show very little in the world of playing cards, and they let the opponent play most of their cards so that the Bears can see how they're handling it. what they clearly saw is that when they need a third down, they're going to attack Jalen Jones, and that the hole between Elijah Hicks and Jalen Jones in cover 2, cover 4 is one that's easy to attack.
Yep.
Unfortunately, those guys
Yep.
can get caught guarding grass. So instead of trying to coach up those two DBs in the middle of the game, I loved that Matt Eberflus just decided to blitz on probably 40% of downs for the rest of the game. Blitz or send pressure. I'm conflating the two. But
Yeah.
TJ Edwards would blitz from depth. And on the next play, you'd have Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards both sitting in the A gap pre-snap with a double mug look, and they'd fall off and Kyler Gordon would blitz. And then on the play after that, nobody would blitz out of a formation, but you'd still see the defensive line or the offensive lineman miscommunicate and expect somebody to blitz. Because kudos to the Bears, if everybody can envision this, Brian Flores has basically set up his entire defense around the idea of what if I presented a pressure look 100% of the time. Matt Eberflus is running a defense that I would better describe right now, Nick, as what if I could pressure you from any formation and you just had to prepare for a pressure from anything
Mhm.
because I actually might try this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we're seeing some 5-yard depth linebacker blitzes that have been some of the most successful blitzes over the last 16 games that
Mhm.
I've watched in my life. I mean, think back to that Detroit game in Detroit. I'm sure you remember it. Twice you got TJ Edwards blitzing from 6 yards deep, and it's like the offensive line just opened for him, and he
Yep.
just got TJ down the pipe. Like,
They
this
they don't think he's gonna come. That's why.
this thing is working. Like what the
Mhm.
Bears are doing. Kudos to Eric Washington. Kudos to Matt Eberflus. I know sometimes we aren't the biggest fans of the way they run the team, but this defense is putting the screws to offensive coordinators. And I mean, you've probably seen it from a coverage stat perspective. There's nobody right now that has a higher like EPA per coverage drop back than the Bears do. And
Yep.
I think it's because of smart pressures alongside good DB play, and it's a darn shame that Brisker may miss the game. I think Blackwell is a fairly capable sub for Kyler Gordon, though I think Kyler basically, okay, I don't know if you feel this way. To me, Blackwell and Gordon wash in coverage, but Kyler is much fiercer in the run fit and as a
Yep.
blitzer.
Yep.
So you get almost a more gadget feel from Kyler Gordon or a more impactful player from the nickel, but you
Mhm.
don't lose as much as you think.
The
Hence, Blackwell picking off Trevor Lawrence later
Yeah,
in the
the
game.
the drop off isn't there, but the drop off between Brisker and Hicks
That's pretty
or
steep.
Jones and Stevenson was pretty vast.
Jones and did the Jones to Stevenson drop off give you any renewed appreciation for Tyreek Stevenson?
No, because I still think Stevenson's been playing well. I'm curious. Have had Terrell Smith practice this week, so I wonder if he's going to be back finally. But Robert, I want to congratulate you real quick. I have to cross off one of my stats because you talked about the EPA for Bears coverage. So there goes one of my million stats, and you covered it.
It's a fun football team. And the other thing about this, Nick, that I know I keep going back to, I don't know where you want to segue to next, but like what I'm having trouble with is that I have been predicting these games from the perspective of who's the best unit on the field. And it's
Mhm.
usually been the Bears defense that was contested against Houston, and the rest of the way, not really, right? That's still true. Like going into a game against Washington, this is the best defense Washington has faced far and away. And it's obviously not
Oh yeah.
incredible that the Bears are a little on the vulnerable side to the run game, but at the same time, the Bears are inviting people to run the ball. Like there's only one team out of 6 that is successfully committed to running the ball and done so well. And I don't know if Washington has the dogs that the Colts do up front and with Jonathan Taylor. They're a really good running unit, though. I don't want to take anything away from them.
Yeah.
It's a weird conversation to me because I feel like you and I thought that the Bears defense was going to be closer to the like bottom of the top 10. They aren't playing that kind of ball. Like
Mhm.
kudos to them. Evan Ingram was a matchup nightmare against Tremaine Edmonds. He's generally a lot better against tight ends. Evan Ingram is a star, and he won that one-on-one matchup. Tip the cap to him. It didn't matter. Like the Bears defense was wallpapering the Jags, and they're
Don't you remember Brian Thomas,
dude,
breakout star?
I cannot believe TJ Edwards hustled down the field like that to end up with that face guard. And by the way, if Caleb had thrown a ball off the linebacker's back with a guy wide open like that, people would be eviscerating him.
They would be. They would be. Um, yeah, I got a lot more stats to cover, but I do think that transitioning to the in-season trade stuff, I think could make a little sense before we dive into Washington and everything because it's been huge. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins got traded. We've seen a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of injuries, unfortunately, but a lot of talk of, you know, pipe dream, probably Miles Garrett and Max Crosby, and whether the Bears should trade for someone, but also we could trade Nate Davis and Khalil Herbert away. Those have been all in the trade market. I I've shifted, Robert. I initially was let's make a trade. Maybe not necessarily, Max Crosby, Miles Garrett, which would cost a one, in my opinion, at least. But even like coughing up a two to get, a pass rusher, whatever. I don't think linemen necessarily change a whole lot that are useful in season. I've shifted to the most I would give up as a three. And I would like to keep it because again, in my mind, we're not playing for this year. If you want to make the move, you can do it in the offseason for next year. But I just don't think I want to give up either the one or the two twos for this trade season. How about you?
So to me, it depends on what the move is, right? Like if theoretically you're making a move for a 33-year-old pass rusher, I'm going to pretty much deny that on the spot, right? But I think you can make a Sweat like move. And I'm not trying to say that there isn't a Sweat available. Otherwise, I would tell you his name. But it's more to say, Nick, let's use the pipe dream example that let me clarify, everybody. This is not going to happen. But if you traded for Miles Garrett, Max Crosby, Jeffrey Simmons, well, they'll be here next year. They'll be here the year after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it's not you're making the move now, but you're paying dividends. It's really an investment in Caleb's rookie contract.
It
I
is.
actually think there is such thing as being too patient. Uh, the main thing, if I was Ryan Poles, is I kind of need to see how this week works out. And if I'm even more patient than that, we can go the week after that. Folks, it's kind of funny. We've got the American election rolling around. Just like how there's early voting going on right now, this is the early trade deadline. The
It
deadline
is.
is November 5th. So when it comes to teams that are trying to shed players, well, they're not there yet. You've got a great offer for DeAndre Hopkins, what's left of him, that the Chiefs jumped on, and the Titans were happy to send that trade in because that was the best offer they were going to get. But if the Raiders, for instance, are shopping Max Crosby, they're going to take best and final offer around November 4th.
Yep.
So you got a little bit for this to happen.
Mhm.
All of that said, Nick, inside of me are two wolves. Okay? Wolf number one looks at this defensive line and says, holy moly, if you could add a legit top 10 edge rusher, this defense would explode. The way they're playing right now and the way they're built, if you had one more straw to stir the drink, they would be so nasty. And when you did blitz, their like formation alignments would be all over the place. Nick, you would get to the point where you would force two natural chips, more than likely, on each side of the ball, which would take receivers out of most of the plays that you're trying to
Yep.
run. It would have a ton of value. The other wolf in me is like, go get a cheap run stuffing defensive tackle, like a John Ridgeway. Like, there are other names that Quentin Crisco bucket stats posted that it's like, go grab yourself an Ashawn Robinson, like send a third or a fourth or
I've got a
something like
list.
that
Yeah.
for a run stuffing nose and call it a deadline. And maybe
So
shed some of the people you don't want, but that's
so
it.
here's a part why I think this is difficult because it's a good problem. Darrell Taylor, you muddied this up. Austin Booker flashing. He hasn't done a ton within games yet, but you made this a problem because if both of those things don't happen, then I think Chicago does make a move because you're like, well, we got Walker, we got to kick him inside. Sometimes we have nobody else. But because those guys have been, I would say, more than
They've been
capable,
very good
I would
ball
say,
players.
yeah, Taylor's
DeMarcus
been,
Walker is having a great season.
yeah. Now, because of that, I think it muddies it up a little bit in terms of the desperation needed, just like we saw the Chiefs, they're desperate for a receiver. The desperation for me, and I know this again might bother people, is D tackle. having, Pickens was limited in practice today, but having a third and fourth functioning D tackle that can be not moved and teams run all over you would be advantageous. So here's a list of guys
Ben
that I have, Robert.
Ben
Do you want to?
Johnson. Ben Johnson's going to put the microscope on Chris Williams, and
Oh,
like Matt Lafleur is going to put the microscope on Chris Williams. Like,
oh no.
to speak to your point, you gotta, Nick. I think you and I can just say it this way: the back half of the Bears' schedule is hard enough that they might as well be playoff games in a sense, or
Yeah.
at least they're playoff caliber teams. So
Mhm.
you can't stop. You have to stop looking at the Bears as, are they good enough to beat the Jaguars? Now we have to start aiming for beating the Seahawks. I'm not going to include the 49ers because they're starting to look like an injured shell of themselves, which
Yeah.
ironically we both mentioned going into this season.
We did.
But
We
so
did.
that you got to be good enough to contend in the division. Blah 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 blah. You've heard it before.
Yep.
All of that to say that this defensive tackle thing, it's a real thing. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I don't know. There's
So
keep
here,
going.
here, here, let me give you a list of guys, okay? And tell me what you think. So let's say it's the end, okay? And we
Yep.
could, if you want to throw out what you think an offer would
Yep.
be, um, I've got, I've got four guys. So you said Max Crosby. I mean, I think he would be more likely dealt than Miles Garrett.
I think so.
Um, Another one. This is very doable. Zadarius Smith.
Yes.
Um, he's y'all. I mean, think of oh man, what's the rings? What is it?
What, Pernell McPhee?
No, the Marvel movie having the Infinity Rings?
Oh, Thanos.
Yeah. So he's already got the Green Bay and the Minnesota,
Oh,
right? So
that's
now he's gonna
funny. That's
go
some funny
Chicago,
stuff.
Detroit. So Zadarius Smith, um, Azeez Ojulari, he's just the third rusher for the Giants. That one doesn't make as much sense because he's
I don't think so. I
smaller.
don't think so.
Yeah,
That
that
to
one
me
I
is
don't think so.
that's your Darrell Taylor role,
Right,
and
right.
we have one.
Now, the other one that's exciting that I don't know anyone's mentioned him. Carl Granderson with the Saints, 19th best overall edge. He's like 28, 29. He's already gotten paid decently. They're not going anywhere. That would be the only one. So of
And
those
that,
four,
yeah,
those four edges, to me, Zadarius and Carl Granderson make sense because they would actually be a force on the edge. But what would you give up and would you want to make that move?
Zedarius is probably like a third or fourth rounder. I bet you might even get him cheaper than that. But like, there is a point where there's just no sense in making a trade, and like that's what I think is going on with Khalil Herbert. Is I doubt anybody wants to trade for him what the Bears would like to receive, because you got to remember, you lose a player. And so if the Bears lose their RB3, then they're exposed to injury. So how much do they like Travis Homer? Probably a fifth round pick. And so that like, I doubt anybody wants to meet them at any higher than like
Right.
take Herbert in a seventh for a sixth. So no deal. And
Mm.
in that same way, Zadarius Smith it's a question of, frankly, how down bad are the Browns. And so Granderson, I think, is one of the Bears' seconds. That is literally your swift move or your sweat move. Like, that's as close as I think you're gonna get. I don't know if you feel that way, but it's like,
He's older though. I
he's
don't
older,
know.
but he's cheaper. So, from a contract value perspective, you get to bring his extension with you as opposed to handing the guy top of market money. I have a feeling it wouldn't be a first, so it would be a second. Because, like you said, he's one of the more productive edges in football. Also, there's a question of, are the Saints even willing to deal him? Which is
Yeah.
a separate question, because the Saints are not out of this thing yet, and nobody wants to get fired. But the teams that are welling in the tank, good question. You mentioned Crosby. I do think Crosby, and I know I'm going to sound ridiculous. I think Garrett, both of these are questions that only their owners are going to have the answers to,
Mhm.
but both could end up being available for the right price. I
Mhm.
don't want Garrett. I think you'd have to pay ultra superstar price for him. But
Yep.
Crosby, I'm interested in. Interested with a hard line there, because
Mhm.
it's going to cost a first. If it costs a first and late day two change, maybe we're talking, but I don't know, Nick. It's pretty rich. And
Right.
like, as excited as I am about this in particular Bears team, I also think that the Bears are going to naturally get better as Rome takes firmer hold of this offense. I don't know what if you're seeing the same thing I am on tape. He is the Bears' best route runner. I mean,
Well, hold on. I still got more trade things
well,
before
oh
before
yeah, I'm
before we dive
more
in.
talking Just to clarify, I'm not trying to get you sidetracked on Rome. I'm
Yeah.
trying to say the goal of a trade is to improve your team. The Bears
Mhm.
are on a trajectory to naturally improve and reach
Yes.
a different tier by
Mhm.
the end of the season. So if you're making a trade, you're trying to catalyze that a little bit. And a Zadarius Smith type helps. You mentioned a bunch of the D tackle guys. I think a lot of them make more sense.
Well well, I got more, so and I got one, Robert. Oh, you when I say, you'll laugh, you'll
Who
get
is
it.
it
Okay,
going to
so
be? Are you going to say Dexter Lawrence?
no, 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 no. Okay,
Good.
so Sebastian Joseph Day for Tennessee makes a little sense. He'd be a solid third tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Shelby Harris, Cleveland,
Solid
he would
player.
be very good to
Yes, he
get.
would.
Adam Butler, decent with the Raiders, and then my favorite one, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Calais Campbell.
Yeah. Why am I not surprised?
He's the 4th best D tackle in PFF. Again, he can play both spots like Walker.
I think the complicated part about what the Bears need is that they need a reserve run stuffer, in my opinion. Like the goal is Andrew Billings just played 6 snaps in a row, but we gave up a third down. So now we got to pull him off the field because he's exhausted. Who can we put in that's not an automatic L on the ground? And the Bears don't have one of those guys right now. And as much as I'm sure everybody out there is cheering for Zach Pickens, he's not that guy. And so
Oh, hold
it's
on. You're I know you're not talking about my boy Calais Campbell as being movable.
I'm not saying he's movable, but he's not 320, right?
He's 6'8", 282, but he's also has a 78.4, I'm sorry, 75.3 run defense grade.
Can you point, not to challenge the PFF thing, because I think PFF does a great job, but can you point to tape where he's two gapping?
He's done both. He's done one gapped and two gapped in
I
his career.
bet I would imagine that he's winning as a one gap run defender and a gap and a half, which is great. You need those guys. But to me, it's not the same as the nose, like the double team stack guy. And hey, I love the versatility we're seeing from Javon Dexter, who, by the way, was a maniac as a pass rusher in the last
Ye-
game, which
Yeah,
is
he
more
did
just
really
an
well.
aside. But
Did really well.
he's that slow burn pressure. Like, I know you're not over the moon about those kinds of guys, Nick, but it's like, hey, there are too many plays where the only one who moves the quarterback is Javon Dexter.
Yeah,
And
but any pressure is better than no
any
pressure.
pressure,
But
no
but
pressure.
but hold on, would you be interested in trading anything for those other guys? Sebastian Joseph Day, Shelby Harris, Adam Butler.
I think so long as it's a 4th round pick or lower, sure. I mean,
Okay.
I know that this is probably me making some assumptions. I'm anticipating the Bears are going to have a 4th round pick by the end of the year. Yeah, out of the Justin Fields deal, he's too close. Like 3 games between now and the end of the season. I'll be
Yeah.
shocked if he doesn't get those 3 games. It's
Well,
totally
just snaps. It doesn't have to be all games. Just even more snaps
Yeah,
counts.
exactly.
So,
Like, I don't know if Russ is going to make it that long. It feels unlikely. Quarterbacks get nicked up.
mhm.
I think they're going to get a fourth out of that, and then I think they're going to get 2/3 out of more than likely Ian Cunningham getting hired at some point.
Yeah,
So if
he
that's the
deserves it.
case, I'm okay being a little freer with picks because as much as I know somebody out there is like, Robert, you're the nerd. Why are you okay? Like, why are you okay trading draft picks? Y'all, really take a minute and think about this. The Bears' future 6th round pick is going to have a hard time making this team.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't mean it's a waste. There is such thing as having too many picks when you've already stockpiled decent depth on the roster. You can always have more. Don't get me wrong. But Nick, when the Bears made the trade, or not the Bears, when the Rams made all those trades, they pushed for the Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl. And now, regardless of the state of the Rams, you can't take that away from them because banners fly forever. I don't believe, maybe this is me being too football coach, Nick. I don't believe there is ever a year where you shouldn't take a sideways look at the Super Bowl and say, okay, but why not us? Because
Mhm.
at this point right
Well,
now, at this point, you're going to have to pull off an in-division upset in the playoffs. But divisional games are coin flips. So there's the
But I
sick
think
part of me, Nick, that's like, if you put the Eagles up against the Lions or the Commanders up against the Lions, like, name me another good NFC team. It doesn't really make a difference. Like, if you put one of them up
they're
against the
all
Lions,
in our division.
I feel good, but like about the Lions. But the moment that it's like the Lions are playing the Bears in Motown with the Super Bowl on the line. I'm not saying Bears get favored. I'm saying that it's not a 0% chance.
Yeah.
And
What the you remember the Khalil Mack trade? I am not convinced. That year, the defense was amazing, right?
yes,
Obviously, they had the run. I'm not convinced that Khalil Mack's play on the field was what generated that monster as much as the front office pushing the chips in, believing in the team, and that's confidence. Like everyone knows that. Like when you make that move, it's like, oh man, they think that we can do this. That also is a part of this. But also on the flip side of this, Robert,
also Akeem Hicks played defensive player of the year ball
he
and
was
he never got a nod for it. And I believe, I really do, Nick, that if he had had a bigger brand going into that season, he would have won DPOY
he
because looking
lovely
back, he
guy.
was unblockable.
He was amazing. Injuries, hate him. Um, Khalil Herbert and Nate Davis are talked about being traded.
Hmm.
I personally, and I know people have their things about Nate Davis, Khalil Herbert hasn't played much. If we have the mindset, Robert, that, well, we could make the playoffs, we could do things, I wouldn't trade either guy because an injury happens here, an injury happens there. Oh no, we need depth. Now what happens? I don't know that we're going to save much salary wise because Nate Davis, if you cut him in the offseason, it doesn't change much from cutting now. Khalil Herbert's going to be a free agent. We're going to sign guys. So I think the comp pick's going to change. Having just a sixth or a seventh or a compensatory, I don't know that's going to matter a whole lot. I would keep both of them because I think that they're at least high end quality backups if, hey, break glass because emergency happened at positions.
Speaking of breaking glass, I feel like I just solved the case. Like I just had a moment. For any of the
Uh-oh.
live audience, you can go back and you can look at my face and you will literally see the moment of realization. Okay, so here's the thing, Nick. What's going on with Nate Davis and Khalil Herbert? I agree with you. Okay, to be blunt, like let's put the scout hat on. These players are better than a lot of the backups on the Bears roster. There's no sense jettisoning them. But the Bears just hired an offensive coordinator. So there is going to be turnover, natural turnover of
Mhm,
guys that are, in simple words, being phased out. Right, Nick?
mhm.
The Bears clearly kept Bill Murray and Matt Pryor and a host of other offensive line because they, in looking back, this is my opinion, were preparing for a world where Nate Davis did not meet their expectations. And at least right now, maybe I'm picking on the wrong guy here, Nick, because I'm not trying to go after Nate. I just have not gotten a flag from the Bears that they believe in Nate Davis or are
Oh, no.
committing to him at all. And so,
Oh, that's fine.
if anything, there were trade rumors surrounding Justin Fields that stretched a long time about how he was definitely going to fetch a second. He did not.
Mhm.
I do wonder whether the recent rumors about Bears potentially shopping Nate Davis, et cetera, I wonder if that's the Bears working through the media to move two guys that they don't want. So then why Herbert? Because Herbert's been the weird one to me, right? Like, are we really that excited about Travis Homer? And then I remembered there's another running back on the
Bayless.
roster.
Yeah, Bayless, man.
Do you think the Bears want to trade Herbert to fire up V12? I'm kind of asking seriously. Like, is the goal to inject all 12 of those cylinders into the offense? Because what's really, Nick, you know what's really going to take the top off this offense is a little bit of Valus
Well, you
Jones.
know what's interesting? Because on Hard Knocks, they talked about how valuable he is on special teams, and he can't even make the game day roster. So I think that's part of it. But again, it is depth. So I mean, to me, here's the only thing that makes sense to me. If you deal them for the compensation to then get your D tackle, I'm cool with it then.
That
But
makes sense.
otherwise, protecting Caleb and keeping the run game together, if we're 1, 2 injuries away and the playoffs are something you're thinking of, I would just keep them.
Speaking of, there's one other thing we ought to talk about before we leave the subject of trades. Bears fans, I think the Tooth Fairy is cool. Sasquatch is rad. Bigfoot is out there. But trading offensive linemen in season is kind of like believing that these things are completely real. You got to remember, an offensive lineman has to know absolutely every call, absolutely every part of the scheme. There's nothing read and react about playing offensive line. When you trade for a defensive tackle, you say, we're two gapping on this play. The middle linebacker and the lineman across from the guy can just go, you're two gapping on this play. And that means the same thing across every system in football. Offensive line, you got different terms, you got different shoulders, you got different angles, you have different techniques, you have different ways that the unit is trying to work together. I am not telling you that it won't happen. I'm telling you that historically it doesn't, and Nick and I would be blowing smoke up your you know what if we told you that trading for an offensive lineman was a realistic
Well,
thought.
here's an example. Amari Cooper just got traded to the Bills. He got a touchdown last week. I don't know if you guys watched the film pre-snap. The play's called. Cooper lines up in the right spot. He looks at Keon Coleman, rookie Keon Coleman, and Coleman does this. He's like, hey, you're running. He literally makes a hand motion. You're running an in-breaker like this. He
This is
runs
the
the
post. You're
yeah. He
running
ran
the post.
he ran the in-breaking post and he caught a touchdown. So like Amari Cooper as a NFL veteran, as a wide receiver, it's tough to pick up all of the calls, all the nuance stuff. So yeah, I think O-line is difficult. Um, I I'm okay. You want to start Washington offense or Washington defense? And I've got multiple stats for
So,
everything.
the big thing I just want to start with is a quick apology before we get into a game that I still favor the Bears in. Gonna hit you with that up front. I think that there are a lot of people, Nick, that have gotten they've almost devolved into this my guy's the best, no my guy's the best that reminds me of an almost playground mindset. And I just want to say this is Jaden Daniels has played much better football than I thought he was going to play in the
Hmm?
NFL. I thought there were clear problems on his tape that he has gotten into the NFL. He has worked his butt off. He and Cliff Kingsbury have put together an offense that works. It has worked for 6, 7 weeks now. And I just want to give Jaden Daniels a legitimate vote of confidence, Nick, because I feel so many Bears fans are out here trying to discredit what Jaden is doing. And I just don't give a darn about Offensive Rookie of the Year. For a brief moment, I just want to say Jaden's playing good ball. I feel
Mhm.
like we should all be able to say that. And I'm a massive Dan Quinn hater. He's got these Commanders playing ball. And
Yep.
will it last? I don't know. Will any of this last? Who's to say? But today, as you and I record this on Wednesday night, Dan Quinn has this bad Commanders defense playing pretty bad. Like they're a step above what I think their actual talent level is.
Yeah.
He's got a okay offensive core playing very well. And he hired an offensive coordinator that at least so far through the season, because I know what you're about to say, is balling. And so far, I feel like this Commanders org and the Bears org are more in parallel than they are set against each other. And they're going to play each other this week. And everybody's pointing that
Yeah.
out. But then they're going to go their separate ways
Right.
again.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can all say this is working out great for both sides right
No, it
now.
is. And Nick, that's part of it for me. So I was against Jaden Daniels too. He was again. This is a recording. He was my
QB3.
fourth quarterback, y'all. I had it. Caleb, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, then Jaden Daniels, and it wasn't because I didn't like Jaden Daniels. I just liked four quarterbacks in this draft. I just thought there were some flaws when he dealt with pressure, which kind of the stats are still there, but they're doing well enough. And he's doing a lot of the stuff he did in college successfully in the NFL more than I thought it would be at this point in his rookie year. So, y'all, there's a lot of bad football out there. Let's just appreciate two young guys playing good football. And also, let's look at Washington, a history of not having success, just like Detroit. Like, I'm cheering for Detroit
Yes.
because they deserve some good things to happen. Washington also deserves some good things to happen. The other team, Cleveland. I'm at some point I hope that they have some success. It's not there right now, but so I have whether Jane Daniels plays or not, he didn't practice today. I have a million stats on him. I'm going to cruise through them, Robert, because I don't know how much time we
Do
want
it.
to put on Jaden, but also I think that people need to know in case he plays, but also he deserves the credit. So he's first in the NFL in completion percentage, 21st in touchdown percentage, 25th in INT percentage, which I think is a little interesting. So he doesn't throw um, um, touchdowns at a high rate, but he's completing balls. He's has ninth in success rate, 4th in yards per attempt, 13th in yards per completion. So he's still moving the ball well, 20th in yards per game. So they're not airing it out as much as you would think, but he's 6th in quarterback rating. He's first on target percentage, which is good. Ninth in sack percentage, similar to Caleb. So it's not great. Um, 25th in bad throw percentage, which is good. 29th in being pressured per dropback. That means he's not getting pressured ever. 29th, y'all. Which I think sometimes that's like that you kind of slowly collapse the pocket because you want to contain his running ability. Which shockingly, he's only 8.3 yards per scramble. It's 16th in the NFL. Actually, it was behind Caleb. But obviously the threat is there. When he's under pressure, sixth best PFF grade in the NFL. I was shocked at that because in under pressure in college, it was either he only threw like 50% of the time and then scrambled a bunch. Now, again, sixth best PFF grade, fourth best run grade, 21st best pass grade, but still, I think it's incredible to give him kudos on that one. I got a few more stats, but I feel like you got something there, Robert.
Well, it reminds me of kind of okay, so looking back, Nick, people like you and me were probably the wrong person to ask about Jaden Daniels. Like, let's just be blunt, okay? When you watch Jaden Daniels, you see a lot of the same things that were incredibly exciting about Justin Fields.
Mhm.
And we were so fresh on where Justin was that if I had reframed Jaden Daniels' tape as Justin Fields, but he actually understands how to throw the ball quickly and he's got the release to do it, you and I would
Mhm.
have said, well, I don't know if that's a perfect quarterback, but that's way more holistic than what we're seeing in Chicago at the time. And that's what we've seen in Washington right now, where
Yep.
just like with Justin, when you pressure him and you let him get out of the pocket, he will murder you. I
Yep.
mean, he's been phenomenal when it comes to toting the rock. He's taken a lot of hits. He has scrambled
Yeah.
more than any quarterback. He was on
Well,
a rate to scramble more than any quarterback ever, which is
aw,
probably not a list you want to be on
no.
when you're a little
It,
sleight of frame.
y-
But
y-
you got to acknowledge the athleticism because
yeah.
when you're special, you're special.
The other thing that's interesting too is people are like, oh, well, he's like Lamar. He's not because Lamar has improved as a passer in the NFL. Obviously, MVP multiple times, but very dynamic running the ball. Lamar is good at throwing between the numbers and struggles more when it's outside the numbers or deep down the field. He's gotten better, but that's where he struggles. Gene Daniels is great outside the numbers and
Yes.
great on deep balls and still can scramble, but not as good between the numbers. So, like, really, y'all, like, it's everyone has different things that they're good at, but these two quarterbacks they're just
Hmm.
different and they succeed in different ways. Um, his PFF grades per depth I thought was interesting. 69.5 behind the line of scrimmage, 74, and again, 70 is about average, y'all. 74.9 short, 95.3 medium, and 68.2 deep. So the medium range, that 10 to 19 yards, likely outside the hash numbers is where he's really succeeding. 92.3 grade in play action, which again, y'all, we'll talk about this. They have a great run game. 72.8 with no play action. I know we've seen the stats and people have fun with direction of passing with Jane Daniels. Okay.
I
To
can't
be
believe you
fair,
pulled these numbers.
I know. Like, let's get some
This
truth.
one I couldn't believe.
Let's get some truthful numbers. But again, some of it is a little bit true. So throwing to the right, 44 54, 81% completion percentage. Throwing to the middle, 68 of 82, 83%. Throwing to the left, 15 of 25, 60%. So the least accurate. And he's throwing left at less than half the rate of throwing to the right. So it is true. He doesn't never throw there, no matter if someone messes with a chart or not. But again, y'all, Jane Daniels crushing it. Offense is cruising. I'll get into the individual offense here in a little bit, but I think Jane Daniels deserves our respect.
I have a metaphor, I have a comparison, and then I have a point to make. Okay? So, the metaphor is baseball. Because one thing that I've seen a lot, and I know, do you watch baseball ever, dude?
I mean, I used to more, especially when the Cubs were, making the playoffs.
Okay, then you'll probably be able to apply this to some kind of player. When a hitter comes to the major leagues very early on, generally nobody has a good scouting profile on them. They have some gisty numbers from AAA, but they don't know what somebody can do at the major league level. Therefore, they get a vanilla set of pitches. And in many cases, I'll use an example. Joey Gallo was on the Texas Rangers, but another example of this is actually Nathaniel Lowe for different reasons. Here's the point. Joey Gallo can't hit anything that breaks, and he strikes out left, right, and center. But early in his career, he hit like 50 homers because when he did get a fastball, he drilled it, Nick. Then with Nathaniel Lowe can't hit a fastball, which is weird in the NFL, but in the MLB, but he won a Silver Slugger award because nobody figured that out, and he hit every breaking pitch that he saw briefly. And then teams adapt, and pitchers won't throw you anything you can hit, and they only throw you what you've shown you can't. And right now, it is hard for me to look at a team in the Commanders that is running for the third highest yards per carry in football. Dude, these guys are never in unhealthy down and distances. We aren't seeing 3rd and 12. We aren't seeing 3rd and 10. We're seeing 3rd and manageable, play action valid downs, left, right, and center. And nobody's really asking Jaden to do what he can't do just yet. Like
Right.
any of the flaws that we've seen on his college tape, they haven't manifested because they haven't had to. No defense, whether it's a talent level issue or whether it's scheming on the Commander's case, they just haven't put him in position to have to do what he didn't do in college yet. Caleb, this is a direct comparison purely for the sake of storytelling. Caleb played a horrible first 2 weeks because he hit the ground trying to do something he didn't do in school. Like he's been trying to play with anticipation from the pocket, using creation as a secondary weapon that frankly he only started manifesting over the last 2 weeks. Jaden has played almost exactly like he did at LSU. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is a very polished game with a very polished quarterback that's very good at throwing these RPOs, these go balls, these routes.
Yep.
I just can't help but wonder, Nick, what is it going to look like when they change? I don't think it'll be bad, but I
Mhm.
wonder if this is a 2022 Jalen Hurts season. That's the comparison. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
No,
Not the same
100%. Well,
not the same
there's
player, but a season where the quarterback had everything go well for them
Yep.
around them, and it can create some inflation.
And I've got, again, a lot of stats on that part of it. So let me dive into that part.
Does that mean that you're there too on that?
Well, let me dive into that part, and then I'll talk about their offense as a whole right now. So shout out Connor Allen. He's at Connor Allen NFL on Twitter. Is a friend. A lot of stats. He works for 4for4. Commanders, the defenses that they've faced, here's their EPA on defense: 22nd, 21st, 24th, 29th, 17th, 27th, 31st, and Chicago 3rd. It's going to be, no matter what happens, if Jaden Daniels is out there or not, they've never faced a defense that is any good like Chicago is. Now, again, the Commanders' performances have driven those numbers worse for those defenses. I'll give them that credit. But also, when you have this big of a sample size, it kind of says something. Just like Cliff Kingsbury, y'all. Okay.
Oh,
We have to get into this right now, and then we'll dive into the offense because this is such an outlier. And I got some people that are like, you just don't like Jane Daniels. That's not true. I don't like Cliff Kingsbury. I think Cliff Kingsbury is a fraud. And here's why. I have 11 years that say I am correct. So, Cliff, hey, if you're a fan of the pod, you don't want to like me. I get it, but change your stripes, man. Okay. Let's make this a full season because if you guys don't know, Cliff Kingsbury has started every year for the last 12 years as positive. Things start off well and then they end horribly. And let me go through them. Okay. I'll try to be as quick as I can, Robert, but this is juicy stuff, y'all. I've never seen
you
a
were
12
born
straight
to
year.
deliver. You were born for this part of this podcast.
I mean, 12 straight years of the same data. Come on, y'all. Okay. 2013. Again, this stretches Cliff at Texas Tech, at USC with Caleb, and the Cardinals, as well as this season. Okay. So 2013 started out 7-0, ended the season 1-5, the last 6 games. 2014, 2-0, ended 2-8. 2015, 5-2, finished 2-4. 2016, 3-1, finished 2-6. 2017, 4-1, finished 2-6. 2018, 5-2, finished 0-5. 2019, this is like the worst start actually, is 3-1, finished 2-6. 2020, 6-3, finished 2-5. I think people will remember this year, 2021, the Cardinals start out 7-0. Kyler Murray, here it comes, finished 4-7. 2022 is last year at Arizona, started 2-2, finished 2-11. The year with Caleb as a offensive analyst, start out 6-0, ended 2-5. And this year, they've been 1-1 the last 2 weeks after starting out, I think, 3-1. And I don't know when it will fall off, but it's fallen off so many times in a row. And there's some people that are like, well, he's the offensive coordinator now. He's always been in charge of the offense, y'all. Do you understand? He's an air raid guy. This is what he does. I don't know if teams pick up on tendencies, Robert, if he doesn't change his personnel, his formations, his plays, whatever it is, defenses pick up on this. And for 12 straight years, teams have made him lose games in the second half of the season every time. Like this can't just be, hey, I flipped a coin and unluckily it went heads 10 straight times. That doesn't happen. This is something that you can see things and there's
Oh yeah.
flaws in his coaching.
And it feels to me, and I only say this because I'm Texan. I've been watching this guy since
Yeah.
Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Like because Texas Tech was fun to watch when Cliff Kingsbury was the coach. They pulled off some insane upsets, especially early in the season. And I like Kyler Murray, who played at A&M. So you
Hey,
end up
he,
with
he had Patrick Mahomes too, y'all. This isn't
I
like he didn't
know.
have a quarterback. He had Mahomes,
Hey,
Kyler Murray,
you can't
Baker,
you can't say Cliff Kingsbury doesn't know quarterbacks because he's associated with too many solid ones. I'm serious.
mhm,
Like these things aren't always what
Caleb.
I was gonna say, like, you can't divorce the fact that you say he's a fraud. I think he is limited. I think Cliff
Sure.
Kingsbury designs really good easy buttons, with the problem being that I don't think he has a backup plan for when he overuses those easy buttons and they run out of fuel and there really isn't an adjustment, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that because you just didn't plan for one. You thought that these RPOs would get you all the way all the way to January, and then teams started figuring out some way. Because all it takes, Nick, this is a league where every single week a new defensive coordinator. I mean, you have to flip a coin, unfortunately, because half the defensive coordinators just want to play their style of ball. It drives me crazy. Blah blah blah. I hate that stuff. But the other half of the defensive coordinators are going to try an adjusted game plan,
Well,
and
they get paid too.
and
They
if
get
it
paid too,
oh,
y'all.
and Nick, if it works, that's the only game plan that these guys are gonna see for the rest of the season.
Well,
Like,
what happened to the Rams with Sean McVay and
yes.
Jared Goff? They
Mhm.
saw a game plan. Everyone did the same thing, and they couldn't win the Super Bowl.
Yep. And the year after they didn't win the Super Bowl, that's the only game plan they saw every single game of that season. And the
Yep.
offense fell apart. They traded Goff
Yep.
because that is how drastic these things can get.
Mhm.
And so I say all of this because, like you're kind of getting at, I mean, hey, pot call kettle black for a moment. We have seen what good or bad defenses can do to an offense as the Bears offense suddenly has vigor out of nowhere because they played two of the worst defenses in football. So I get it. But also, Nick, this Bears defense presents a shockingly high grade challenge for Washington that I just don't know if they're ready for, and I would like to have this conversation, okay? Take your Bears glasses off for a moment. I'm serious. As best you can. If you were a Commanders coach, knowing the little that you know, or even just a Commanders fan, do you want to play Jaden this week?
Oh, I wouldn't, no, because 1, I think I would have like a long-term view of him, and 2, how important is this game? I mean, you're 4-2, and Mariota played well last week, so if you can get your star player to be 95% because y'all they're not 100% anymore when the season starts. If you can get them or 90% versus 60, because what if it's a rib and then it punctures a lung? If multiple ribs break, now it becomes a month long injury, 2 months. I wouldn't chance that.
So I got 3 points that agree with you. Point number one. Uh, if JT can say it about the Bears, I can say it about the Commanders. History does not look kindly on rushing a mobile superstar number two quarterback back onto the field too quickly when it comes to this jersey. Does it, Nick? Because
Uh,
RG3 wasn't that long ago. Point number two. If you look at the Commanders' schedule, they play the Bears, an NFC opponent. We can say this game doesn't matter. That's not true. This game matters. It just matters less than the game against the Eagle or the Giants next week, and in 3 weeks the Eagles game, and in 4 weeks the Cowboys game. You need
mm,
Jaden back for those. You don't need him for the Bears team that has beaten the tar out of every quarterback they've faced. If you watched any of the last 3 weeks, you're going to see Matt Stafford in the second half getting beat to hell. You're going to watch Andy Dalton in the second half getting beat to hell. You're going to watch Trevor Lawrence in the second half getting
well,
beat to
the
hell.
the other part too with Jaden is that, and I saw this on tape from college, he doesn't protect himself well. So, like, if I know my quarterback doesn't protect himself, I might have to protect him from himself by not playing him.
And if it was me, Nick, and I had the choice between trying to play Jaden, but we're going to try to limit his mobility, or not play Jaden at all, Mariota played too well. I don't see the need to do it.
Yep.
Right. And maybe Mariota's going to go out there and get shredded by Matt Eberflus, like I actually think will happen, at least on the general scale. Oh, well, you lose 1 week, you play the Giants after that, and either Jaden can go or Mariota can go beat the Giants for you. I don't understand the Commanders' need to rush Jaden back onto the field, given the almost grave tenor that everybody's talked about this injury with, right? Like when you're talking about further testing on Monday and Tuesday, I look at this and I'm like, so clearly this isn't just some nick. Like
Yes.
nobody brought up Tyreek Stevenson's injury today. To use an example, he had a calf problem that twinged in practice, couldn't play in a game, and over the course of the bye, it was apparently such a non story that nobody's asked a question. That's what a 1 game injury looks like.
Yep.
The way we're talking about Jaden Daniels with people posting graphics of like, he will undergo further testing, like these are 2 week injuries usually. So I don't personally think he's playing. And I don't think Mariota, while he can operate the offense effectively, is the X factor that can pull the Bears out of their fits the way that I think Daniels might have.
No. No, but also, like, if I'm looking at this, and again, like, I want Jaden to do well, y'all. Like, even outside of, and I want Jaden to pull Cliff Kingsbury and he can ride his coattails to they don't have a terrible end of the season. Like, I want you guys to know that. Like, I want Jaden to do well. And I actually am cheering for Washington because I think they deserve something well. I just don't think Cliff Kingsbury is going to design something good enough for them long term.
And you don't have
But
to
with
pretend you're
that,
cheering for him this week. Like
what?
it's every you don't have to pretend you're cheering for him this week.
Well,
Every
no, no,
week
no, no,
except for
just
this.
not when they play Chicago. But with that said, if I'm thinking of, okay, I want him to do well, I have to make sure that he's like not going to hurt himself long term. Like, think of Caleb, right? The I talked about this. A successful season for Chicago is Caleb's development, and he does well. Same thing with Jaden. Let's say Jaden gets a serious injury. Okay, now it's like he comes back next year. He's a little whatever you'd want to call it, groggy or slow because he's not used to the progressions and things because he has to get caught up. He's rusty. Just like Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson was super good for 4 games last year, played part of the games. He's rusty to start this year and hasn't played a lot of games. So, like, I think that builds on it. And I don't want this to be, oh, next year's not as good as it could have been because we rushed him back from an injury and all of a sudden it could knock him out a month, 2 months, etc. this year.
Dude, I actually want to go back to the Richardson thing. I think you bring up something really apt. There's a pressure that is created when you aren't playing well. It's the same pressure that pushed Baker Mayfield out of Cleveland for a I mean, Baker played through a torn labrum. That
Yep.
didn't matter. He put 8 bad games on tape, and that was enough for the Browns to think that they needed to move on. In Richardson's case, he plays 2.5 games, misses the year, comes back this year, and you can feel the pressure around a second-year quarterback right now. I mean, it doesn't help that he's playing, honestly, unacceptably inaccurate football. But
Yes.
he was always raw. 2 seasons would have been early, according to any sane person, but he missed the whole first year. So
Yep.
now we just have to evaluate this. If it's
And
me,
you're struggling with confidence, you're
right?
struggling with everything, man.
If it's me and I'm looking out for Jaden's health, I'm serious. This has nothing to do with the Bears. This is what I would honestly do. You want to take the next 1 to 2 weeks so that Jaden can get as close to playing his normal game as possible.
Mhm.
Don't ask a guy who's not been in the league for a full year to adapt anything. We do what we do. You do what you do. And if we can't do that with you right now, you shouldn't play.
Yep.
And that's why we have Marcus. I mean, that's why the Bears have Tyson Bagent. If
Mhm.
Caleb Williams couldn't move because his right ankle was locked up, I would hope that they would sit him too. But
Mhm.
he's healthy, so
Yeah.
that's not the
So
problem we have to address.
so let me cruise through how Washington has crushed it so far this year, which has been probably the biggest story in the NFL. Again, this is expected points added. All right. Second in overall offense, second in passing, first in rushing by a wide margin. So I know Robert had quoted yards per carry, but this is just like efficiency and what's expected on first by a wide margin. Tied for first in points per game, first in points per drive by 0.39, Robert.
It's insane.
That's massive. Fourth in starting field position, which helps. Third and third down percentage. First and fourth down percentage. They've converted every fourth down, by the way. 14th in red zone percentage. They have been insane on offense.
Wow. I thought you'd have a follow-up point because I was
I
hoping
I
for
have
one.
more. I mean, I just want to pause. Do you want me to keep going?
there it's funny, right? I feel like this is a team that is playing old school complementary football. It's just the yang to the Bears yin, where the Bears are a defensively led team that you can feel the momentum when the offense contributes. In the other hand, the Commanders are an offensive team whose offense puts so much pressure on other teams that they make mistakes against a defense that I don't think is super talented. But they're creating decent results anyways, because like you're talking about, you mentioned the field position thing. That's just desperation and mistakes, like lived out. But keep on going. They have a billion metrics that are all phenomenal.
Yeah. So this is rushing direction because they are first in rushing and they're super efficient. So they average 5.2 yards per carry. Um, by player, it's 5.6 yards per carry for Daniels. Interestingly enough, Mariota has rushed 13 times, only 2.8 yards per carry. So you want to talk about a difference that would make
Oh
by
yeah.
switching quarterbacks. Um, Brian Robinson's their best rusher, 4.7 yards per carry. Eckler is kind of your change of pace. He's older now, but a good receiving back, 5.9 yards per carry. But also Jeremy McNichols, 6.6 yards per carry. I'll get into their PFF grades in a minute, but just in terms of rushing the direction, y'all, going left end and right end. Left end is 7.5 yards per carry. Right end is 5.7. Those are two of the top three in any direction. And in between there, it goes left tackle on in 3.6, 3.2. Midline left is 6.1. Midline right 3.8. Right guard 4.9. Right tackle 3.5. So what does that say? They rush outside a ton and they run basically midline or right guard. Those are the ones that are plus EV for them.
Hey Nick, I'm not a student of the Commanders, but you read out those stats, and what does that sound like? Like if you and
Read
I were to
option.
pop on tape, yeah,
Read option.
it sounds like zone read.
Yep.
And if the- it, Bears fans, Bears fans, listen in, lean into your headphones, lean into your speakers as I tell you this. You know this. You've seen it. The gravity that Justin Fields creates in the run game pops lanes open for any running back that he plays with. And we saw this for 3 years in Chicago, Nick, that once Fields shows himself to be a dynamic rushing threat, then you catch the back left or you catch the back three defenders sometimes shading towards where the quarterback is going, and it lets the running back break open massive seams. And the problem is, at least for the Commanders, if Jaden Daniels either can't play or can't play like normal, you can't do that. And so now your running game is stuck with 3.1 yards per carry up the middle, and you're trying to live and die when you're running to the edge, but you're just not as scared of Marcus Mariota in the open field as you are about Jaden Daniels, who might rip off a full on explosive on you. And
Mhm,
so, to me, Nick, this is poorly timed. Like, this injury is poorly timed for what Washington wants to do against the Bears. I would
mhm.
never recommend that a team just packs it in. But Daniel's ability to control the tempo of the game as a runner and a passer has been what this offense has fed off of. And I don't think he can offer that this week. And if
No.
he can't, I think that that matchup swings very widely in the Bears' favor. It's why I'm as confident as I am.
Yep, yep, and I'm with you there. I'm gonna go through the PFF
Oh,
rankings.
can I say one more thing?
Yep.
Because I just realized the other piece of this is, let's say Jaden Daniels was fully healthy. The Commanders just draw a tough matchup here. Like, we should talk about this, Nick. That what generally gets tested when you're running outside? Your corner's ability to fit the run, your
Mhm.
linebacker's ability to stretch sideways, and your edge's ability to contain or to set and contain the edge.
Yep.
That's where the Bears are solid.
Yes.
Like, stopping teams from rushing wide, the Bears can handle that. It's if you go straight at their tackles and you get a combo block up to Tremaine Edmonds that you can pop seams wide open, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what the Colts did with a ton of efficiency. But the way the Commanders are generating a lot of these yardage, I actually think Tremaine Edmonds can range over there. I think
Yep.
Jack Sanborn can put himself in the right spot. Kyler Gordon, should he play, can make that play. So even if Jaden Daniels was fully healthy, I would still like this matchup for Chicago because I think they would be able to mute their efficiency, not take it all away. But all
Mhm.
you got to do is take these plays from 5.7 yards per carry to like 4.2 with 3 holding calls. And if you can get that, the efficiency just evaporates.
Well
It
well,
evaporates.
let me ask you this, Jaden Daniels is 100% healthy, okay?
Mhm.
They're running their same stuff.
Yes.
Does Chicago continue the streak of holding teams to 21 points or less?
If they don't, I think the Commanders only score about 23. I mean, it reminds me a lot of their game against the Ravens, right? Where the Ravens are a very good defense that's also pretty solid side to side. And so I don't want to make it all 1-to-1, but at that point, Nick, it becomes more a question of, can the Bears offense hang 27 on these guys? And
R
spoiler
r
alert, I do think they can.
Ravens are 27th EPA defense, but okay.
Are they
No, serious.
seriously?
Yeah,
Are they seriously?
yeah.
How did a team with that much talent that
They
just
they
last year?
lost their DC. They lost some pieces, man. Patrick Queen's gone. They lost
Dude,
Jadeveon
people
Clowney
hated
left.
Patrick Queen years ago. I can't stand the linebacker thing. Like, this is not me trying to turn this into a linebacker hate moment, but like, tell me, Nick, that I'm wrong in that linebackers are so system dependent that it is bananas to try to grade them as if they're outside of, or as if like they're ever 1-to-1. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
no, I know that, but you lose your DC and,
Oh yeah.
efficiency can change. All
I'm
right.
actually I'm more talking about how Patrick Queen wasn't this guy early with
No,
McDonald, but
no.
then he became the guy
He
and
did.
left. And
He
I don't
did.
know how he's doing now. Maybe he's doing really well. I couldn't tell you.
Uh, Pittsburgh, I think, is where he went. I'll check it out.
What a shame Roquan's defense is struggling. What a darn shame.
You're
Bummer,
you're
even.
you're asking for it. Okay. All right. PFF rankings, y'all, by position offensively. And actually, I forgot defense, so I can do that as well. So Jane Daniels is fourth best quarterback according to PFF. Brian Robinson, running back, 12th. Austin Eckler, 48th. Jeremy McNichols is actually qualified with enough snaps. He's 16th. So they've been very efficient running the ball. Again, I would guess lighter boxes. Zach Ertz is starting tight end. Doesn't move like he used to, but he's still 46th. John Bates, more of a blocker, 53rd. And Ben Sinnott, I like a lot. Rookie,
I love Senate.
55th. Y'all, they have one weapon. It's Terry McLaurin. I love Terry McLaurin coming out of Ohio State. He's the 13th best receiver in PFF. After that, it's Zacchaeus. He's 52nd. Dynami Brown, 56th. And Luke McCaffrey is 102nd. So really, Make Terry McLaurin's the person to look at. Zach Ertz isn't going to kill you. All the other guys aren't going to kill you. So there's one guy to put all your efforts into, and we have a corner I think that can do that. Interestingly enough, Robert, do you know the Washington's left tackle who starts
It's
offhand?
isn't it Leno?
No, they cut him.
Oh, they cut him.
It's another former Bear though.
It is. Uh, uh, how
He's
many?
he's
How many of them are still out there?
he's 15th ranked PFF left tackle or offensive tackle right now.
Who is it?
Cornelius Lucas.
You're kidding. He
Not
developed into
kidding.
a decent, like into a good tackle.
He's I think he's like 33. They have a lot of actually older guys that are just playing well right now. So yeah, I just Bears legend Cornelius Lucas,
Older
left
guys
tackle.
over the course of a season. You know what that generally means.
I know, I know. Uh, Cliff Kingsbury knows too. All right.
I'm not trying to be a hater. It's just you see it with the Niners. Like
Yep.
it's part of what I think is exciting about the Bears is that they're relatively insulated from depth. Relatively, knock on wood. But I mean, best example, dude. In the middle of a struggling passing game, the Bears lose Keenan Allen, and DJ Moore is playing like he's upset, and Rome goes for 140 yards.
Yep.
Like that's the depth we're generally talking about. Also, just saying, because I feel like it ought to be said about a guy like Sinnott. Sinnott's like what 55th? Is that what you said in like
50,
current tight
yep,
ends?
50-50. Yep.
Well, I have learned a lesson with Cole Kmet that I will never unlearn, and it's that you got to give those tight ends until that fantasy football 26, 27 breakout age before they're really going to pop for you because Cole has moved so much better this
Yes.
season that
Yes.
it's remarkable. I mean, that's the only word for it. Where
Mhm.
I did not know that a human body could change like this the way that it has for
He
Kmet.
deserves a lot of credit, man.
A ton. He's got to have put so much work
I
in
mean,
to get to this point.
flexibility, ankle flexion, hips, knee, like lots of stuff. All right, continuing through quickly. Nick, I think it's Allegretti, left guard, 23rd PFF. Tyler, you know him, Cowboys. How do you say his last name? Badaz?
Biada's. I actually don't know how to say his name.
Oh man,
Uh,
come on, you're in tech.
Biada's is what I always saw it as.
He came from Dallas to Washington, followed Dan Quinn, who, by the way, shout out to Dan Quinn, Robert. Gives me hope that I can still wear backwards hats into my 50s.
Right?
Right guard, Sam Cosmi, former second round pick. He's 21st among guards. Then Andrew Wiley, 45th, the right tackle, used to play with Kansas City. So O line is looking very, very good. I'll pause there. Anything you got to say there, then I'll go back to defense.
It's funny looking at this offense because I mean the stats I think bear out that this is actually really similar to the Andrew Luck RG3 thing. Like I don't want to it's too much of a layup, Nick.
Yep.
But it's the truth again that the Commanders are a team that is fueled by an exceptional quarterback that is a threat in both phases of the game in a way that the Bears have not injected Caleb into their run game. So the Bears' run game, up until recently, subsisted entirely off of what the run unit could do, and then the passing unit subsisted entirely off of what they could do, and they were kind of separate from each other. We're seeing a little more quarterback run from Caleb now. It's only got to be enough to be efficient, but hopefully that doesn't tend towards full luck where Caleb just ends up getting battered. Point being, Nick, I don't know what Jaden Daniels' usage rate is, but you going through the weaponry that they have was a really stark reminder that this team is built off the star power of a quarterback that can draw extra attention on any down, whether he scrambles, whether he's running the ball, whether he's offering the ball for a handoff. Eyes are on Jaden Daniels.
Do you remember back when RG3 that rookie year was amazing? Do you remember his running back?
Was it Alfred Morris?
Alfred Morris. So Alfred Morris busted out because of the read option. Same thing with their running game.
Mm-hmm. And I say all this because, I mean, that's awesome. Like, good for them. And I hope that they're able to continue it. I do wonder if any limitation on Jaden Daniels, whether he's out or not in at all, it means that this offense takes a big step backwards. They didn't against Carolina. Carolina is at a breaking point. Like, not to point fingers, but when teams collapse, they collapse bad. And that was a tough one to watch just as a fan of football. But I don't know, Nick. I struggle going through this offensive unit. They have been productive as all hell. They have schemed a bunch of stuff wide open, and they have played mostly defenses on the level that people are clowning on the Bears for having success against just recently. That's
Mhm.
pretty much been the whole season. So
Yep.
it's hard for me to look at a Bears team with a ton of talent on it and say anything other than the Terry McLaurin up against Jalen Johnson go ball deep should be a lot harder. And that
Mhm.
one I hope the Bears are ready for. Don't get
Yeah.
beat by that.
So defensive PFF rankings. I forgot. I didn't get to this one. Sorry, y'all. So Dorrance Armstrong also came from Dallas to Washington. Followed Dan Quinn. He's ranked 37th. Dante Fowler, the second best PFF ranking of his career. He's 37th as well. Um, Khalil Farrell bounced around a little bit. Former first round pick. People might remember from the Raiders. He's 108th. D tackle.
Yikes.
What's up?
I said, yikes.
Yeah, yeah, no,
108th?
yeah, no, it's not
You
good.
dropped that like that's a normal ranking.
Sorry. I don't worry. I have one here that I have for Yikes on purpose. D tackle. We remember the D line they had, y'all. Chase Young, Montez
Yeah.
Sweat, Jonathan Allen is now done for the year. And then the other one, the only remaining guy they have,
Drawn pain.
Deron Payne. Yeah. 36th PFF ranked D tackle. The other one now is Jerzon Newton, right? Illinois, remember him? What do you think he's ranked out of 119 D tackles, Robert?
Okay, I'm thinking. And I'm going to go with 85th.
118th. He is second to last
Dude,
currently.
I think he's hurt. Like
Yeah,
I know it's been
but
talked about a
maybe.
lot. I think he's just trying to gut out an injury because I think he's a
I
tough guy.
I
Um,
liked him a
yeah,
ton coming out.
but I mean at the same time, dude, like my understanding is that it's a foot injury and like I'm coming at this from the perspective of like a physics person. I would say physician, but that means a different thing, right? Nick, imagine the force that's on Javon Dexter's foot when
Yes.
he stacks a double team. Or watch Andrew Billings on any snap. Look how low he gets and how much pressure he puts on that
Well,
foot.
Robert, I think that especially NFL guys, I think there's a lot more foot injuries happening because they're bigger, faster, stronger than they've ever been, and there's
Mhm.
so much force. The bones don't change, man.
No, it's the pitcher problem with elbows that just can't handle the rigor of current baseball, which is a legit epidemic that baseball does not seem like right now they have a handle on. And with defensive linemen, we're asking linemen to play bigger, play faster, and stack more double teams as duo gets more and more popular than ever. And
Yep.
it's just physically, it is bone breaking. And
Yep.
at least in Newton's case, when you read a PFF grade that's that bad, that sounds unplayable. Like,
Yeah.
am I able to use that word? That sounds like he's just not playing at an NFL level right now,
Oh,
which is a dang
that's
shame.
worse than Chris Williams, like their other D tackle is Mathis, he's 104th. So also
Fidarian
not good.
Mathis, he couldn't move at all when I
Yep.
watched him on Alabama.
Yep. Linebackers are pretty good, y'all. Frankie Louvu, 34th. And the person that can't age and always gets it done, Bobby Wagner, is 6th.
Dude, what a dog.
Dude,
Like,
I love Bobby Wagner. I can't hate it all.
guys like him and Sanborn are great reminders that if you know where to be, it's just a matter of can you get there fast enough. And
Yep.
sometimes if you know a second ahead of time, it's Danny Trevathan's 2018 season when the linebacker just accesses that flow and they can see the future.
Yep.
They feel like they're everywhere, man.
Yeah. Well, okay, the tangent here, which is not normally my area, but anyways, um, because of the Vikings, right? Showing all of these exotic looks and people going all over the place. Detroit gashed them, right? The second half, they had things dialed up and they had them
Hmm.
because defensive guys have to think and they can't just react and play.
Hmm.
But then you look at, you kind of said this, kind of the Bears are like this boring, standard type, think lovey defense. But guys know where they're already going to be and they can play so fast. And there's advantages to that, y'all, versus having to, okay, I don't know, I'm going to mess around in this gap and then have to end up in this gap. If you know where you're going to go, you're going to be a step faster, like you're kind of describing. I think there's some advantageous positions for that. All right, DBs.
It's really funny watching this, Nick, because like, okay, to use a silly example, envision you're looking at a square, right?
Mhm.
And then you turn the square like 90 degrees and you pinch it a little and it becomes a diamond, right?
Mhm.
Which is a different shape. The Bears defense is basically doing that. Where on about half their snaps, they line up and they present you exactly the look that they showed
Yeah.
you. And then
Yep.
on another half of the snaps, they switch from cover two into cover three. They switch from cover two into a cover one blitz. They switch or they blitz from depth and they just play like four under two deep. They'll do something else, right? Sometimes they're in man, sometimes they're banjoing, sometimes they're in spot drop zone. And kudos to the Bears, they just aren't, they are giving you clean looks, but they have called plays such that you can't trust the look you're getting.
Right.
And I mean, you just don't get into let me be blunt, Nick. You can be high in defensive spending, sure, but you don't end up third in defensive EPA per play without playing without calling good plays. To be
Yes.
very direct, like the scheme is working.
Well
It
well,
is.
and using half of last year too. You had all that together.
It's basically like Flores is telling you the truth, and it's hard to believe that he would hit you with that again. But he will do it because he's
Mm.
completely fearless. The Bears are, from a schematic perspective, just liars. But they're not. They're not playing. This is, I think, my favorite part, Nick. I've watched a lot of Joe Barry style schemes. This is a hell of a tangent, but I think you'll like going down it. I've seen a lot of Joe Barry-esque schemes that think that disguise is the answer to everything. So they disguise everything. And the problem is, just if you can envision it, Bears fans, that when you ask the safety to go from a too high alignment into the box, they end up out of their run fit all the time.
Yep,
Because
they're late.
if you run outside zone to the left and you've got the left side, the backside safety rolling into the box, he's never going to get to the front side A gap, which is
Nope.
technically his fit because it's just too much motion and guys are
Mhm.
moving. God forbid, Nick, you run an old school power play and you get a guard that pulls and Brisker never sees it and now he's just lost and the
Yep.
ball is somewhere else. Like that stuff happens. It's part of why the Packers got gashed the way they did. So the Bears are playing a scheme that basically tricks the offense into letting them play straight up because they lie just enough times to keep the offense honest. I
Mhm.
actually, Nick, am super impressed with the way they're doing this because they're keeping that simplicity and speed that Lovey made popular in 2006, but they're adding just enough wrinkle
Yep.
that opposing offenses can't just say, this is a cover two look. Let's exploit it. Because then all of a sudden, Tremaine Edmonds like drops into a cover three spot instead of a cover two spot. You didn't see that. Wait, if this is cover three, then where's the extra Kyler Gordon hits you from behind
Mhm.
because you just
Mhm.
didn't catch the nickel blitz. And
Yep.
there's enough of that that it keeps guys guessing. You got to tip your cap to this Bears
And
defense, man.
well, and part of it for me is that I know CJ Stroud and Houston struggled against Green Bay this last week, okay? But we have to remember they didn't have Nico Collins, I would argue a top 5 receiver in the NFL,
You could argue
and they're
he's
on the
the
road.
engine of the offense. Like I
Right.
know we love CJ Stroud, but that guy is the engine.
He
Against the
is.
Bears, any play that wasn't Nico Collins was bad. Can we say
Right.
that? Like
Right. But add in Robert. So you saw bad. I know people think that right now in their mind, but like Houston has been on a heater. And Chicago went down there and still held them to within 21 points. I understand that they got a fumble by Cam Akers inside the 5. I get it, but you can't do this for this many games in a row. And holding, even if you held Houston to 28 points at home with all of their horses, that's still an accomplishment when you look at some of the things that they've put up and CJ Stroud has done. So to me, it's been enough game planning that we really need to give Flus his flowers.
we have to. There's a force of will element to this. Like I can name you one game that was a monstrous I can name you two games that were monstrous letdowns in their own way. The Colts game I think was a missed opportunity and it's the worst one of the
Yep.
last I'd say 16 games defensively speaking. The other one that everybody's going to bring up is the Browns game. Now, Nick, I will defend Flus on the Browns game because if you collect a pick six and a pick that puts the ball in the one, you're allowed to give up 17 points. I don't care when they are. The offense should win that game.
Yep.
Like you should score more on offense. That's not the problem. And the fact that the game lasted long enough, whatever. 3 games I want to point out. Number 1, Week 18's Packers game. The Packers score 17 points on a performance that does not make any sense. The Bears let guys open left, right, and center, but truly they made critical plays at critical moments that kept points off the board, plus a little bit of luck. And in a game that felt like Flus was forcing it to stay within one score, the Bears end up losing
Without Jalen Johnson.
without Jalen Johnson. Week 1, 2024, no other team wins that game. I'm completely serious. No
Oh,
other
yeah.
team wins a game where their offense gave you 150 yards, I think. Like, the Bears came back. That's unbelievable. They were down multiple scores, and their defense even scored the game-clinching points. That's amazing. The third game I want to bring up, I've actually lost it, unfortunately. I think it was no, I can't remember. I'll bring up something that started in the Rams game, but it's now happened in the Rams game, the Carolina game, and the Jacksonville game. Last 3 weeks, Nick, coming out of the second half, the Bears have created a turnover immediately. I'm talking they get out of halftime, and sometimes it's been a fumble. In the Carolina game, it was Kevin Byard with one of the sickest interceptions I've seen from a safety in a while. And then in Jacksonville, it was a fumble against Evan Ingram, where, if you remember, TJ Edwards winds up and smashes that ball out of Evan's hands.
Yep.
This Bears defense is looking for chances that I have a hard time giving anybody but Matty Eberflus credit.
Yep.
Like, we'll be hard on him when he deserves it, but Nick, this is something that I will say the thing. Bears fans, I'm hopped up on a bye week. Strap in. You may end up laughing at me about this 10 weeks ago, Nick. If it wasn't Matt Eberflus, if this was Mike Tomlin, you'd say, that's just what Tomlin does.
Yes.
If this was Bill Belichick, you'd say, that's just what Belichick does. Like, he just takes these pieces and he makes it more than they are. Matt Eberflus has got a second-round pick, a cast-off defensive tackle, the second best edge on last year's Commanders team, playing lights out on a defensive line that shouldn't be this good. DeMarcus Walker, the Titans were happy. Like, they were fine seeing a rotational guy go. And the guy is getting pressure on like a quarter of his snaps, dude. Like,
You know what I think it is? Like, why Flus doesn't get the credit is because the Bears were in that massive rebuild, and for a year and a half, they just looked like all terrible garbage.
and he
And then
lost a billion games.
Yep.
Like, his record, even if you go back and you extract the whole, let's call it a tank season, and the first 4 weeks, he's still 11-12. Like, we're still not talking about a coach with a winning record, according to every exception we can grant him. So we got a little bit before we talk about having something.
All right.
But-
Last stats that I have, the end of the million here, is their DBs. Okay. This guy that I like, Mike Sanders, still plays some nickel. Also,
Good DB, Michigan kid.
Yeah, maybe good tackler. He's shifty. He's 50th.
Small.
Very small. Yep. Benjamin St. Just, 88th. Noah.
Is that the kid from Ouachita Baptist? No,
Benjamin
right?
St. Just? No, he's Minnesota.
Okay, no, I'm thinking of a different guy.
Yeah, he's long, 6'3". He's a long guy. Noah Ibnani, I can't say his last name. Former first-round pick from Auburn. People remember, went to Miami. Now he's here, 84th. This is PFF ranking. Former first-round pick last year, Emmanuel Forbes, isn't even starting, Robert. Nope. But his PFF grade, okay, again, y'all, 60s average, 36.8.
I was like, I know you got to mention him.
Yeah. Michael Davis, 39.7, former starter with the Chargers. And then safeties, Jeremy Chin, I know Bears fans wanted him, 28th, and Quan Martin is 39th. So there's some decent spots in there, but I think that the Bears would be able to run and pass on this defense.
The big question is going to be, can the Bears, honestly, I mean, I think it just depends on what Shane Waldron wants to do. Like, if you ask me, Nick, the complex part about where the Bears are at offensively, can I just like cut it straight with you? Be very direct.
Yeah.
The Bears need to be a pass first team. Like, you have to give Caleb the baton, because I think when you use the run as a secondary option, like, for instance, let's use an example, direct example. The Bears had a lot of success with one of my favorite plays in football. I love, Nick, shotgun toss out. Like when you've got the back to your right hand side, you line up in the gun, you get a 3 receiver set, sometimes a 4 receiver set. You just take the snap and you just toss it to your right. I think it creates great angles. I think it functions kind of like a draw because the defense's first step is backwards into pass
Okay.
protection.
Not like a pin and pull is what you're saying?
Not like a pin and pull. Well, so
Or crack toss?
the line's gonna play it kind
Okay.
of like that, but but I'm not talking about crack toss where you go under center and you toss the ball out. I'm talking about the ones where you've seen it where it's a shotgun set and the quarterback just sort of juts the ball sideways. And for all intents and purposes, you're running in the D gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get it, I get
Out
it.
besides everybody else. The point being, these kinds of mix-up runs are working when the Bears are cooking, like, through the air, but they have to get cooking through the air first. You have to attack and soften up some of these intermediate areas. You gotta throw outside the numbers. When the Bears are winning with their receivers, it's opening up things for the offensive line, and when I look at a team like the Commanders, dude, they're just not good enough at corner to stop what the Bears have at
No.
receiver. At least they shouldn't be, and if they are, we've got a different problem. So if it was me, I would be running stuff like digs, outbreakers, curls. Like start with just getting chunk yardage plays off of attack that corner, attack that corner, attack that corner, attack that corner. Make them push the defense out wide, then get back to what you've been killing people with lately as you assault over the middle again. And then you mix in some run game and you should be able to do what they've been doing, which is just like roll in
Well,
perpetuity.
I agree with you, and furthermore, I think the Washington's won games. I know this is gonna sound dumb because of the offense, but I think the defense has survived
Yes.
because they've been able to rest. The offense has been so efficient, they continually keep drives going, they can rest up, they don't have to rotate as much because when I look, Robert, Washington has only given up as bad as of a defense is efficient wise, we talked about, right? The 13th most yards in the NFL, which isn't
Yep.
what you think they would be. They've, in terms of plays against their defense, they rank 23rd in the NFL. They're not on the field a lot. There's not a lot going on with them. And so I think that if the Bears defense is successful and they have to force Washington's defense on the field more, we're going to see them deteriorate even more.
Yep. I mean, I know you've seen this, Nick. A lot of the times, especially on red zone, a lot of the worst defenses in the NFL really accrue a lot of their stats when the game gets a little out of hand. And God, Nick, I mean, you've experienced this. If you're an athlete, and frankly, if you're an athlete and you're not playing professionally, ever in your life, you've probably experienced this. It's those games, Nick, where you had that moment where you didn't give up, but you realized you couldn't win anymore and you
Oh
were
yeah.
a half step slower to get to the next ball and suddenly the chunks just start to
Mhm.
fly. You know what
Well,
I mean?
that's momentum.
That's the Panthers last week
Yep.
where very quickly they knew they weren't winning the ball game. And it's not that they lay down, it's just that once the snowball gets rolling against you that bad, you're not getting out of its way. And
Mhm.
I don't I can't say I know cuz we don't that the Bears are going to roll the Commanders. I think it's going to be a tight game, to be honest with
Well,
you, Nick.
well,
But
let's get into that. Is that do you have anything else besides predictions?
oh no.
Okay. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
If I was going to predict today, I think that the Bears win 27-21 against a hobbled Jaden Daniels, and I think that they win 30 to 16 against Marcus Mariota. Uh, so I think that they score more and they allow less if Mariota's in the game. I do think, Nick, that Mariota doesn't get destroyed back there, if that makes sense. Like, as much as I love Matt Eberflus and have talked up this defense, I think Mariota and this offense are fairly capable, but I don't think they're good enough.
So there's one thing we haven't talked about. What one of my favorite things to bring up, Robert, the advantage Chicago has.
It's rest.
Rest. Thank you. Thank you. The
Nick's gonna
Bears are
bring up
coming off
rest. I
the
should have
bye.
known.
And when you have rest, you have a significant advantage even going on the road to winning games. And so Chicago is going to be more rested. That's preparation. That's more healthy in terms of your players. We haven't talked about the injury report. I can roughly go over that, Robert, before I give my prediction. But um, interestingly enough, I don't see him on the injury report. I feel like this is an error. Dorrance Armstrong didn't play last week. He's working his way back. He's not on the injury report this week. You'd think he'd be limited or something, but it's not on there. Um, Brandon Coleman didn't practice. Jane Daniels didn't practice, and Zach Ertz didn't practice. The Zach Ertz is a veteran rest day. Um, their one of their starting guards and centers were limited. Um, Dynami Brown limited, Klein Farrell limited, Dante Fowler limited, Cornelius Lucas, Bears legend limited. That's in terms of Bears or Commanders that play. In terms of Bears, Brisker concussion, hamstring for Gordon, both didn't practice. Limited. Larry Borum back in his window, potentially to come back. Travis Homer, same limited. Zach Pickens with a groin limited. Glad to see him back. We need you. I mentioned this earlier. Terrell Smith limited with the hip coming back. You mentioned Stevenson. That's good. He practiced. He was limited. Scott Daly practiced full with the knee, which is good. That takes away Cole Kmet's odds of special teams player of the week, but still. And my boy, Jacob Martin, full practice with the toe. So maybe he will come back. But in terms of my prediction, I think that's fair to go about it the way that you're talking about in terms of if there's Jaden Daniels versus if there's Marcus Mariota. Because I think it changes differently. I think in both scenarios, Chicago wins the game, and Chicago should be favored. If you looked at the betting markets when it started, it was like 1.5 Washington, and quickly went to Chicago. I think Chicago was -3 last I had checked. Um, I think Chicago wins by double digits either way. That's where I'm at. I
Can
think that if it's
Yeah, go ahead.
I think if it's Jane Daniels, I think that it would be something like 31-21, 31-20. And if it's Marcus Mariota, I I honestly think it's going to be like 35-38 to probably 17.
So I want to hit you with a hard truth, Nick, uh, that I feel like a lot of people are not wise to, because this is getting me. Okay. I keep
Mhm.
seeing betting lines that are very normal. In the NFL, if you're favored by 6.5, you're supposed to blow them out. Like,
Yep.
that's generally how this thing goes. Here's the problem that I'm having: the Bears defense has been so consistent that you are pretty much only asking the question of, do I think the offense is going to be functional in this game? Because at least right now, we've had 3 games in a row where at some point the game kind of spiraled out of control for the side across from the Bears, and they ended up losing by more than they probably deserved, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
The like, to use an example, the Rams, I don't think lost, or I don't think the Rams played a game that should have lost them by 2 scores. And I can't honestly remember the exact final score of that game, but I thought it was a 2-score win. I
Oh,
could be
they
wrong.
played well, I thought.
I did too. I thought that was a really close game, and they lost by a fair bit at the very least. The Panthers got annihilated. That game was over in the mid third quarter. The moment that the Bears scored to open the third quarter off the back of that fumble, the Jaguars game was over. When you're clinching these games this early, somebody's playing real well. And at least to me, Nick, like you're saying, I think that sets the Bears up for a game where they just stun the Commanders. Where, if you can envision it, it's the difference between boxing at one weight class and then you go up a weight class, and that hook hit a little harder than you remembered
Mhm.
everybody else hitting, right? Like, this is a defense that went toe to toe with the Texans. Isn't it wild, by the way, that the Texans have won every game except for their games against the North? Like, just as an aside. But
That is interesting. Well,
so
no, but they beat Chicago.
it's but it's a defense. You're right. It's a defense right now that against every single test it's had, you could kind of include the Colts. I mean, theoretically, I guess the Bears could have easily scored more than 21 points. Don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but they're playing really good football. I don't know why we would bet against this defense. And this defense has more historical proof in its favor than the Commanders' offense does. That's
Well,
just
and
the skin of it.
yeah, but then if we go the other way, they've averaged 32 points per game the last 3 games. So, I have
Offense is
31
hot.
or 35, like, they're cooking too. So and this isn't a defense that can shut you down. So, I I just think that the NFL's not giving enough credit, and if Jaden doesn't play, they probably won't give the Bears a lot of credit for beating Washington without, the superstar. But I think that they cook. So, I think other things to cover is what emoji that we want, Robert.
Is it my turn?
I think it is your turn.
I want the mountain emoji. I just got back from Colorado. I want you to give me the mountain emoji. I want you to tell me how many turnovers you think happen per side each team. So
Mhm.
I want to know how many turnovers you think, or how many giveaways that the Bears will have, and how many takeaways they will collect. Bonus points if you tell me which type. Or that's in interceptions and fumbles. That sound good to you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Hits. Here it is.
Honest to goodness, you want to know the funny realization I had the other day, Nick? Okay, buckle your seatbelt again. Tinfoil hat, kind of. It's not really.
Oh
Nick,
man. Right at the end?
in 10 years, if this thing works, we're going to look back at hits as the reincarnation of the Patriot way. If this thing works,
Yeah.
that's probably what we'll turn this into. And it's funny because when Brady left the Patriots, the Patriots drafted quarterbacks that, generally speaking, did not live up to billing. Bill was summarily Bill walked away. There's obviously a lot more to it, but because I think Bill's the best coach ever, but you get it, Nick. It's more to
Mhm.
say I know there are a lot of people that just hate Matt Eberflus right now, and I'm not telling you he is Bill Belichick. What I am telling you is Belichick made a career out of coaching guys up, getting the maximum you
Yep.
possibly could out of whatever defensive piece he was given, and had a star quarterback with a cerebral mindset that approached the game very similar to the way that we've seen Caleb at least approach the game early, and they won 7 Super Bowls.
Yep.
This is a guy who did not put on his lock screen that he wants to win a Super Bowl. Javon Dexter put on his lock screen that he wants to make the Pro Bowl. Caleb put on his lock screen he wants to win 8 Super Bowls. He's saying he wants to be the unquestioned greatest of all time. And I want you guys, as we progress through the end of this season, Nick, to give this thing an honest to God chance. I've seen way too many people say, yeah, but what if Flus fails and we get Ben Johnson? Flus has beaten Ben Johnson in
Yep.
both of the last 2 matchups. I don't even like Flus that much, but the proof is in the pudding right now. You're
Mhm.
asking me at the wrong time. You know what I
Mhm.
mean, Nick?
Yeah.
Because right now, this thing is trending in the day. If the Bears do what Nick and I said they would, which for the last 5 weeks in a row they have. I'm not even kidding. We've been almost nails on the score predictions and the win-loss predictions. If they do this, they will have blown out their third opponent in a row. They will be facing the Cardinals, who they will likely blow out. Then they will face the Patriots, who they will likely blow out. At what point will you say the Bears are really good? And if the Bears are really good, are you really going to crown Shane Waldron for it?
Or or we're just really good at predicting things, Robert.
I mean, yes,
But
of
but
course.
we got to cut this one off, man. So,
Tell me
like
that didn't get you fired up.
no, it did. It did. It did because I think Flus deserves some respect, and I should give more kudos to what could happen this year. But like, subscribe, y'all. Follow Robert. Follow me on Twitter. Sorry for a delay. We haven't had a pod in a while, but
That's why we gave
we
him a long
appreciate
one.
you guys. I actually appreciate you guys reaching out on Twitter, asking us. I tried to try to stream something, but I'm just not good with technology. Robert's going to teach me. So
I will. I'll make it to where we can see everything. Y'all, we are feeling good. I'm telling you, Nick, if it's me, this is the final thing I have to say. Why not us? Like, just keep that mentality. Because if the Bears do make a move, if they don't make a move, why not? It wasn't but last year, Nick, that if a couple throws go a different direction, you've got the Buccaneers playing with a chance to go to the Super Bowl.
yeah,
So who's to say?
yeah.
And anyways,
Well, a couple plays in the Bears in the playoffs last year too.
I know. Despite everything.
Yep.
Y'all, thank you so much for listening. Like Nick said, like, subscribe, rate the show, hit us with a 5-star review. Don't hit us with a 1-star review. Don't even do that as a joke. I'll find you. I will find you. And I'll give you a good firm handshake for doing it. But anyways, have a good one, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Bear down. Thanks so much for bearing with us.